Chapter 1. Checkpoint. The American gave Alec Lemus another cup of coffee and said, "Why don't you go back home and sleep? We can phone you if he comes." Lemus did not answer. He just stared through the window of the West German checkpoint. The street near the hut was empty. "You can't wait forever, sir," said the American. "Maybe he'll come another time." "He's coming," said Lemus. "It's nearly dark now." Lemus stood next to a policeman who was watching the East German checkpoint through binoculars. "He's waiting for the dark," Lemus said. "I know he is." "But he's 9 hours late," said the American. Lemus became angry. "He's an agent, one of my agents," he said. "He doesn't have a timetable. He's in danger. He's frightened. Munt knows that Karl is spying for us, and Munt's chasing him. Karl knows he has one chance to escape. Let him choose the best time." "How did Munt know about Karl?" asked the American. "Shut up," replied Lemus. And then he added more quietly, "I don't know." A bell rang suddenly inside the hut. They waited silently. High above the checkpoint, huge lamps came on, shining their yellow light on everything. The policeman with the binoculars started to speak in German. "The car has stopped at the first checkpoint," he said. "There is one person in it, a woman. The East German guards are taking her to the hut to look at her documents. The document check is completed. The car is going to the second checkpoint. The woman is going inside the hut. The guards are checking inside the car. The woman is coming out, and the barrier pole has been raised. She is driving the car over the bridge, past the final East German guard, and into West Berlin." Lemus went out of the hut into the icy winter night. The small crowd of people that was always near the checkpoint stood silently, lit by the huge lamps. The people changed, but the faces did not. They always looked helpless and confused. The car had passed the hut and stopped further along the street. Lemus had recognized the woman. He walked over to the car and spoke through the window to her. "Where is he?" "They came for him," she replied. "But he escaped. He took our bicycle. He has some money and some false documents. He said that he will come over tonight at this crossing point." "Tonight?" said Lemus. "Are you sure?" "Yes, he has to," she replied. "All the other agents have been caught by Munt." "All of them? Lenzer, too, as well as Paul, Virek, and Salomon?" "Yes." "How do you know?" he asked. "Karl told me," she replied. "He trusts me, and he tells me everything." Lemus did not reply. He was angry with his agent for talking to this woman about his work for the British Secret Service. He had met her once with Karl, who had brought her to a bar in West Berlin. Lemus had been angry that Karl had brought her to a meeting with him. "Stupid man," thought Lemus. "Agents are all the same. You train them to lie, to trust nobody, and to protect themselves, but they don't listen." He pulled a key from his pocket and gave it to the woman. "You'll need somewhere to stay," he said. "Go to Albrecht Dürerstrasse, number 28. I'll phone you when he comes." He went back to the silent hut. The American was not there. "He's gone home," said the policeman. Lemus told the policeman that they were waiting for a man on a bicycle, and then he went to the window and waited. In front of him was the road, and to either side there was the wall. It was a dirty, ugly thing, built from big blocks of rough concrete, with barbed wire on top and in front of it. "Sir, look," the policeman suddenly whispered. "It's a man with a bicycle." Lemus recognized the man who was pushing the bicycle. It was Carl. "He's done it," thought Lemus. "He's got through the first checkpoint. There's just the second one now." Carl calmly leaned his bicycle against the customs hut and disappeared inside. At last he reappeared, got on his bike, and an East German policeman raised the red and white barrier pole. He was through. He was coming towards them. He had done it. At that moment, Carl seemed to hear a sound and know that there was danger. He looked over his shoulder and began to move faster. An East German guard was on the bridge, watching Carl as he came towards him. Suddenly, the searchlights came on, shining on Carl. Then there was the sound of shouting and a siren. The East German guard dropped to his knees and lifted his gun. The first shot seemed to push Carl forwards, and the second shot seemed to pull him back. But he was still moving, still on the bicycle, passing the guard who was still shooting at him. Then he fell from the bike to the ground. Lemus hoped that Karl Riemek was dead, so that the East German Secret Service could not hurt him when they interrogated him. Chapter 2. The Circus. The plane took off, and Lemus looked out of the window as West Berlin disappeared beneath him. Munt had won. Lemus was leaving Berlin without any agents in East Germany. There had not been any agents when he arrived in Germany, and he had recruited them all himself. Now he was leaving in the same way as he had started. And this was all because of Hans-Dieter Munt, the head of operations in the East German Secret Service. Munt's agents had killed all of the agents that Lemus had recruited. Lemus knew that he had failed, and it was the end of his career. The air hostess brought Lemus a whisky. She thought he was an interesting-looking man, with his grey hair and brown eyes in a handsome, bony face. She thought he was around 50, and this was about right. She thought he was single, which was half true. Long ago there had been a wife. Somewhere there were teenage children who were given money by their father, paid from a bank in London. He looked like a man who could make trouble, a man who was not quite a gentleman. The taxi stopped outside a grey government building in Cambridge Circus. Lemus nodded to the man on the reception desk at the circus, the British Overseas Intelligence Agency, and went to the head of the agency's office. Control shook hands with Lemus. "You must be tired," he said. "Please, sit down." Lemus sat down opposite a small electric fire. Control was smaller than Lemus remembered, but he still wore his old black jacket. Today it was cold, and Control was wearing a brown sweater under the jacket. Control behaved in the way that he always behaved, like a gentleman who knew he had to be polite. But Lemus knew Control was not really interested in him. Control took a packet of cigarettes from his desk and gave one to Lemus. Then he sat down opposite him. There was a pause, and then, finally, Lemus said, "Remek's dead." "Yes, I know," replied Control. "I suppose it was that woman who betrayed him." "I suppose so." Lemus did not know how Control knew about the woman. "Munt had him shot," Control added. "And how did you feel? When Remek was shot, I mean." Lemus shrugged. "I was bloody angry," he said. Control looked at him through half-closed eyes. "Didn't you feel more than that? Weren't you upset?" he asked, thoughtfully. "Yes, of course I was upset," said Lemus. "Did you like Remek?" asked Control. Lemus shrugged. "I suppose so," he said. "How did you spend the night after he was shot?" asked Control. "What did you do?" "Control," Lemus said angrily, "why are you asking me these questions?" Control continued to talk thoughtfully. "Remek was the last agent," he said. "There was the girl they shot outside a cinema, then the man in Dresden, and some others who were arrested. Then Paul, Virek, Salomon, and Lenser. And finally Remek. That is quite a lot of people. I wondered whether you'd had enough of your job." "What do you mean, enough?" asked Lemus. "I wondered whether you were tired, burnt out." Lemus was silent. Then at last he said, "You must decide." When Control spoke again, it was in the same thoughtful way. "In our jobs, we don't care about each other, do we? But we aren't like that, really, are we? I mean, we can't be out in the cold all the time. We have to come in from the cold. Do you see what I mean?" Lemus understood. He sat silently again. Then, when he spoke at last, he said, "Control, tell me, what do you want me to do?" "I want you to stay out in the cold a little longer," said Control. Lemus said nothing, so Control went on. "In our work, we do bad things so that ordinary people can sleep safely in their beds, don't we?" Lemus nodded. "And since the war, our methods have become quite similar to the methods of the other side," Control continued. "But of course we use these methods for the right reasons. We have to be as ruthless as them, even though our government's reasons are better than theirs." "What is he saying?" thought Lemus. "I wish he would say what he means." "That is why," Control continued, "I think we ought to try to get rid of Munt." "Why?" asked Lemus. "We've got no one left in Germany to protect. You just said this yourself. Remek was the last one." Control looked at his hands for a while without speaking. Finally he said, "That isn't quite true, but I don't think I need to tell you about it." Lemus shrugged. "Tell me," said Control, "are you tired of spying? If you are, we'll need to get a different person to do this job. What I am thinking about is not an ordinary job. We need to stop Munt's colleagues from trusting him. They have to believe that he is a traitor, that he is working for us, not them, so that they will get rid of him for us." Lemus sat quietly, so Control went on. "What do you know about Munt?" Lemus knew quite a lot about Munt. In his mind, he saw the photograph of the East German spy in the circus's files. He saw an unfriendly face and white blonde hair. "He's 42, replied Lemus. "He was born in Leipzig. He has quickly become a very important person in the East German Secret Service, and there are now two really important men, Fiedler and Munt. Munt's own colleagues hate him because he is so ruthless, and they are afraid of him." Control nodded, and then added to what Lemus had said. "He's a killer. He was in this country 2 years ago, working for an East German company. We know that he killed 2 of his own agents. He nearly killed our agent, George Smiley, too. Munt isn't a real communist. He is just fighting a war, the Cold War." "Like us," said Lemus. Control did not smile. "George Smiley knows all about what happened here," he continued. "He isn't working for us any more, but I think you should talk to him. Then, why don't you stay with me for the weekend?" "Thanks, I'd like to," said Lemus. "We can talk more about things then," said Control. "I think you might make a lot of money from the other side. You can keep all the money you make." "Thanks," said Lemus. "Of course, you must only do the job if you want to, if you're sure that you're not burned out," added Control. "If you want to make trouble for Munt, I'll do it," said Lemus. "Do you really feel that?" Control asked. "You mustn't think you have to say that, you know. After all, we all get burned out in the end in this job. We don't hate or love anyone or anything, but we don't want there to be any more pain." Lemus did not answer, and Control went on. "Isn't that what you thought after they killed Karl Riemek? You didn't feel hate for Munt or love for Karl. You didn't feel anything. I was told that you walked all night through the streets of Berlin after they killed him. Is that right?" "Yes," said Lemus, then added, "I'd like to get rid of Munt." Control nodded understandingly. "Good. That's useful," he said. "Now, if you meet any old friends in the circus, please don't discuss this with them." "All right," said Lemus. "In fact," continued Control, "make them think that you're angry because we've behaved badly to you. You must begin to build a new life after today." No one was surprised when Lemus did not go back to Berlin. He had failed there, and of course he was too old now to work with spies abroad. He was given an easy job in the circus's office that made payments to people working abroad. However, everyone was surprised at how quickly Lemus went downhill. He was angry about the way the circus had behaved towards him and spoke bitterly about it. He became dishonest, borrowing money from colleagues and not paying it back. At first, colleagues were kind to him, understanding that he was having a bad time at the end of his career. But he was rude to them, and he did not shave, and his clothes were dirty. So they stopped going near him. He did not seem to care. He ate alone in the dining room, and people said that he had started to drink too much. Then he disappeared from the circus. He did not say goodbye to anyone. Soon everyone heard a story that someone had stolen money from the office where Lemus had worked. It had happened just before Lemus disappeared. People discussed it. Was Lemus a thief? For a week or two they wondered what had happened to him and where he had gone to. But soon he was forgotten. Chapter 3. Liz. Lemus lived in a small, dirty flat on the top floor of an old building. There was a grocer's shop on the ground floor. The flat had old brown furniture and a brown carpet with holes. Bare light bulbs hung from the ceilings. He needed a job. Mr. Pitt, who worked at the Labour Exchange, offered him one at the Bayswater Library, but Lemus did not want to work in a library, so he said no. Lemus thought he recognized Mr. Pitt. He was certain that he had seen him at the circus during the war, but the other man never mentioned it. Lemus spent a week working in a horrible factory, and a week trying to sell encyclopedias that nobody wanted. After he lost these jobs, he drank more and more at a pub near his flat. Soon people were used to seeing him there, and in the shops, and on the streets near where he lived. He was a grey, dirty man who did not shave. He never spoke to anyone. He was a man who had to look in all his pockets to find a bit of money. His neighbours felt sorry for him. Finally, Lemus took the job in the Bayswater Library. "The work will be easy for an intelligent man like you," said Mr. Pitt. Bayswater Library was an old building with lots of high bookcases in rows. On the morning Lemus arrived there, he found a young woman on a ladder near one of the bookcases. "I'm the new person," he said. "My name's Lemus." She climbed down and shook his hand. "I'm Elizabeth Gold. Call me Liz," the young woman said. "Have you done this kind of work before?" "No," he said. "Well, I'm checking all the books at the moment," Liz said. Liz was tall and bony, with long legs. Her face was long, too, and she seemed to be both plain and beautiful at the same time. Lemus thought that she was 22 or 23. "You need to check that all the books are on the shelves," she said. "There are boxes of cards. When you've checked the number on the book, you tick it on the card. Why don't you look at the history books?" She took him to a different bookcase, where a shoebox of cards lay on the floor. She left him there and went back to her work. At 1 p.m. Lemus was hungry, and asked Liz Gold what happened about lunch. "Oh," she replied, looking a bit embarrassed, "I bring sandwiches. There's no cafe near here. You can have some of mine if you like." Lemus shook his head. "No, thanks. I've got some shopping to do." When Lemus returned, he smelt of whiskey. He went back to his bookcase and started checking books again. At 6 p.m. Liz locked the library, and they left. It was bitterly cold outside. "Have you got far to go?" asked Lemus. "No," said Liz. My flat's about 20 minutes' walk away. What about you? It's not far, he said. Good night. About 3 weeks after Lemus began to work at the library, Liz invited him to supper. At 5 p.m. she pretended that she had suddenly had the idea. She had already realized that he would not come if she invited him to come the next day or next week. Lemus did not seem very happy about visiting her, but he came. After that, there were many meals at Liz's flat. He always came when she asked him, but he never spoke much. Liz always suspected that there was something wrong with Lemus. One day, she thought, he is going to disappear, and I'm never going to see him again. She said to him one evening, "You must go when you want to go, Alec. I'll never follow you." His brown eyes looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "I'll tell you when I'm going to go." One evening she said, "Alec, what do you believe in? Don't laugh. Tell me." She waited, and at last he shrugged and said nothing. "But you must believe in something," she said. "Something like God. I know you do. Sometimes you look like you've got something special to do." She saw Lemus's smile and hated it. "Alec, don't smile," she said. "It's true." He stopped smiling. "Sorry, Liz, but you're wrong," he said. Liz knew he was getting angry, but she continued speaking. "You don't like conversations like this because you hate something, don't you?" she said. "You're like a man who is going to do something awful." The brown eyes looked at her, and, when he spoke, his voice frightened her. "If I were you," he said, "I wouldn't ask questions." And then he smiled gently. Liz hadn't seen him smile like that before. He was being kind to her now. "What do you believe in?" he asked. "Are you religious?" "No, of course not. I don't believe in God," she replied. "Then what do you believe in?" "I believe in... I'm a communist," she said quickly. He started to laugh. "Oh, Liz, no. You're not a bloody communist." "I am," she said, looking embarrassed. She was angry that he laughed, but she was also happy that he did not care very much. That night they became lovers. He left at 5 a.m. She could not understand why he seemed ashamed. She was not ashamed. Lemus walked down the empty street towards a park. It was foggy, so he did not see a man standing by the entrance to the park. By the time Lemus got to the entrance, the man had gone. Then, one day, about a week later, Lemus did not come in to work, and Liz was worried. The next morning she arrived early at the library, and by the end of the morning she knew he would never come back to his job. She had promised never to follow him, but he had promised to tell her when he was going away. Should she go and find him? At lunchtime she went to Lemus's flat. She went up the dark stairs and knocked on the door. No one came. She turned the handle, and the door opened. Quietly she went into the flat. It was bitterly cold and dark, but she could see a shape lying on the bed in the corner. She opened the curtains. Lemus was sweating and his eyes were closed. He had not shaved for days, and Liz could see his dark beard against the white of his face. She was frightened, but she soon decided what to do. In the next few hours she ran to the chemist to buy medicine, bought soup and soft biscuits, and made tea. She held Lemus's head so he could drink and eat, whispering his name over and over again. At last he stopped sweating and relaxed, and he fell asleep. Then Liz cleaned the flat. When he woke, it was 8:30 p.m. "Alec, don't be cross with me. You're ill. You need me to look after you," she said. For 6 days she made him eat and helped him to wash and shave. Watching him get stronger after his illness, she thought she'd never been so happy. He did not speak much, and once, when she asked him if he loved her, he said he did not believe in happy endings to stories. She often lay on the bed, with her head close to his. Then, on Friday evening when she came home, he was dressed, but he had not shaved. She was afraid, although she did not know why. She cooked their supper while Lemus sat on the bed without speaking. While they were eating, she suddenly cried out, "Alec, are you leaving?" He took her hands in his and kissed her in a way he had never done before. He spoke quietly, but she did not understand what he said. She only knew that it was the end. "Goodbye, Liz," he said. "Goodbye." And then he added, "Don't follow me. Not again." Liz nodded, and she went out into the bitter cold of the street outside. The next morning, Lemus went to the grocer's shop downstairs and ordered a number of things. When the man had put them in a bag, Lemus picked it up. "I'll pay for these later," he said. The grocer smiled politely and said, "I'm sorry, but you can't do that." "Why not?" asked Lemus angrily. The other customers in the shop looked at each other nervously. "I don't know you," replied the grocer. "Don't be stupid. I've been coming in here for 4 months," said Lemus. "You must pay for the groceries," said the grocer. "I don't know you, and I don't like you. Now get out of my shop." And he put out his hand to take the bag away from Lemus. The other customers were not certain what happened next. Did the grocer push Lemus or not? They saw that Lemus hit the grocer with his left hand while he was still holding the bag in his right hand. Some of the customers thought he hit the grocer twice, once on his neck with the side of his left hand, and then with his left elbow. But he moved so quickly that they were not really certain what he did. They saw the grocer fall over and lie completely still on the floor. There was evidence at his trial that Lemus had broken the bones in the grocer's jaw and in one of his cheeks. Lemus's lawyer did not disagree, and Lemus was sentenced to 3 months in prison. Some people learned about the trial in small articles in the newspapers. Chapter 4. Ash contacts Lemus. After 3 months, Lemus left the prison. It was a beautiful sunny day, and there were bright flowers everywhere. He decided to walk across the parks in the centre of London and have a big meal at a cafe near Charing Cross Station. He was carrying a parcel with clothes and documents in it. He decided that he did not need the clothes, and he wanted to get rid of the parcel, but it was too big to put in a rubbish bin. After a while, he sat down on a wooden seat. Then he left the parcel on the seat and walked away. Lemus heard a shout and looked back over his shoulder. There was a man holding the parcel in his hands. Lemus shrugged and walked on. There was another shout, and Lemus heard someone running. A tall man with short brown hair stopped next to him. "This is your parcel, isn't it?" he said. "Why didn't you stop when I called you?" "You can put it back on the seat," said Lemus. "I don't want it." "You can't just leave it there," said the man. "I bloody well can leave it there," said Lemus. He was going to move on, but the stranger stood in front of him with the parcel. "Why are you being so rude?" asked the stranger. "I was trying to be helpful." "If you were just trying to be helpful, why have you been following me for the last half an hour?" asked Lemus. Lemus saw that the man was thinking quickly about what to say next. "He's quite good at his job," he thought. "I thought you were somebody I once knew in Berlin," the stranger replied. "So you followed me for half an hour?" Lemus's brown eyes looked carefully at the man. "It hasn't been half an hour. I saw you a few minutes ago, and I thought you were Alec Lemus. I borrowed some money from him. That's why I followed you. So, if you were Alec, I could pay the money back." Lemus thought then that maybe the man was not very good at his job. It was not a very good story. "I'm Lemus," he replied. "Who are you?" The stranger told Lemus that his name was Bill Ash. Ash told Lemus a long story about how they had met in Berlin and why Ash had borrowed money from Lemus. "I was very embarrassed that I had to borrow money from you," said Ash. "Of course I remember you," said Lemus. "Of course." Lemus and Ash talked in the cafe for hours. A small man in glasses sat at the next table and read a very boring book. At last, Ash pulled his cheque-book out of his pocket and started to write a cheque for £20. Lemus looked embarrassed and stopped him. "I haven't got a bank account at the moment," he said. "I've just returned from abroad. Could you let me have cash?" "Of course," Ash said. "Meet me here tomorrow at 1 o'clock, and I'll bring you cash." When they left the cafe, Lemus left the parcel of clothes there. Ash got in a taxi near the cafe, and Lemus waved till it disappeared. Lemus guessed that he was still being followed, so for several hours he walked and got on and off buses and trains. Finally, he walked to a house in West London. When he knocked on the door, Control opened it. "Come in," he said. "I've borrowed George Smiley's house." "I was followed till lunchtime," Lemus said. Then he told Control the story of his life since he hit the grocer, ending with his meeting with Ash that day. "I'm sorry we couldn't help you while you were in prison," Control said. "And I heard that you were ill. I'm sorry about that, too. How long were you ill?" "About 10 days," replied Lemus. "Oh, dear," said Control. "You were ill for 10 days, with no one to look after you?" There was a very long silence. Then Control said, You know that the girl is a communist, don't you?" "Yes," said Lemus. There was another long silence. Then he said, "You mustn't involve her in this. I'll look after her myself when I return. I just want you to forget her." "Of course we won't involve her," replied Control. "Who was the man called Pitt in the Labour Exchange?" asked Lemus. "I don't know anyone called Pitt," said Control. "Oh, I'm sure you don't," said Lemus crossly. Then he said, "Why isn't Smiley here?" "Didn't he tell you when you visited him?" replied Control. "He doesn't like the job that you're going to do." "No, we just talked about Munt," said Lemus. "But does he agree that it has to be done?" "Yes," replied Control. "He knows why we need to do it, but he is like a doctor who is tired of seeing blood. He is happy for other people to do the operations." Then Lemus asked, "How do we know that I was contacted today by the right person? Are you certain that he works for the East Germans?" Control replied calmly, "Don't worry, Lemus. We've organized things." Then he put his hand on Lemus's shoulder. "This is your last job," he said. "Then you can come in from the cold." Lemus nodded to Control and quietly left the house. He went out into the cold. Chapter 5. Khiva. When he met Ash the next day, Lemus smelt of whisky. But Ash was very happy to see him and gave him an envelope of cash, 20 one-pound notes. "Thanks," said Lemus, who had not shaved and was wearing a dirty shirt. He called the waiter and ordered drinks. When the drinks arrived, Lemus's hand shook as he poured some water into his whisky. Ash talked a lot about himself while they had lunch. He told Lemus about a friend called Sam Khiva, who paid him and other people to write articles about the United Kingdom for foreign newspapers. Lemus just let Ash talk while he drank a lot. He did not talk about himself, and he did not ask any questions. "You don't know Sam, do you?" asked Ash at last. "Who's Sam?" asked Lemus, looking confused. Ash sounded quite cross when he replied. Sam Khiva, the man I was telling you about," he said. "Maybe you've met him." "I don't think so." There was a pause. "What do you do these days? What job, I mean?" asked Ash. Lemus shrugged. "Nothing much," he replied. "What was it that you did in Berlin?" asked Ash. "Weren't you one of those Cold War people?" Lemus was surprised at the direct question. Ash must want to recruit me quickly, he thought. "I was just doing things for the Americans," he answered, pretending to be angry. "That's what we all did." "You know," said Ash, "I've been thinking that you ought to meet Sam. You'd like him. Where do you live? Tell me, and then I can get in touch with you and bring Sam." "I don't live anywhere," said Lemus. "I haven't got a job or any money. I just sleep where I can. The company that I worked for behaved badly to me." Ash looked upset. "You must come and stay with me," he said. "I can't do that," replied Lemus. "I'll be all right. I'll get a job. I've had jobs before." And then he continued, still sounding angry. "I had jobs after they got rid of me. I worked in a horrible factory. I sold encyclopedias. I got bored in a library." "Lemus, you need a better job," replied Ash. "You worked in Berlin for years, so you must speak German well. There are lots of things you could do. But you need to know useful people, don't you see?" Ash sounded almost happy now. "Come and stay with me. Where are your things?" "I haven't got any," said Lemus. "Everything I had was in the parcel, and I left that in this cafe." Ash lived in a small flat in Dolphin Square. There was not much furniture, and there were a few pictures from Germany. It was what Lemus had expected. Ash made some tea, and then he said that he had to go out and do some shopping. "Why don't you get some sleep, Alec?" he said to Lemus. "You look really tired." Then he touched Lemus gently on his shoulder and went out. A few minutes later, Lemus went out too, carefully leaving the door unlocked. He went to one of the public telephones on the ground floor and rang a number. "I'm ringing about Mr. Sam Keever," Lemus said to the voice that answered the phone. "He is coming to a meeting this evening at this address." Then he gave the voice the address in Dolphin Square. "I'll give the information to Control," said the voice. Lemus was woken up by Ash returning. With him was a small, fat man with grey hair who was wearing an expensive suit. He sounded like a foreigner. Perhaps he was German. Lemus was not sure. He said that his name was Sam Keever. They went to eat at a Chinese restaurant. The food was good, and so was the wine, and Ash paid the bill. Then they went to a bar, and Ash continued to buy Lemus drinks. Lemus was drinking whiskey now. Keever seemed a bit bored. Then Lemus leaned across the table and said to Ash, "Now tell me what is going on." "What do you mean, Alec?" Ash sounded surprised. "I mean that you followed me from prison yesterday," Lemus said quietly. "You've told me a stupid story about meeting me in Berlin. You've given me money that you didn't owe me. You've bought me expensive meals, and now I'm staying at your flat. I'm asking, why?" There was silence, and then Keever spoke. "You go home," he said to Ash. "I'll talk to Mr. Lemus." After Ash had gone, Lemus leaned forward across the table again and said, "Are you going to tell me what's going on?" Keever nodded. "Of course. I told Ash to contact you." "Why?" "I'm interested in you. I want to make a suggestion to you. I have a company that asks people to write interesting articles for my customers abroad. You've got memories of your international experience that one of my customers will pay for. They pay quickly, and then they ask for more information. They are happy to pay money into foreign banks." Lemus said nothing. "Why is the other side hurrying?" he thought. Then he answered his own question in his head. "I'm a man with no money who has just come out of prison, and I'm angry with the Secret Service that I worked for. A man like me would want to be paid by the other side for his knowledge." "They'd have to pay me a lot for my knowledge," he said quietly. "My customer is offering a first payment of £15,000, said Kiva. "My customer wants to talk to you now, and you can have the money as soon as you have talked to him. You will receive another £5,000 if you give my customer more information during the next year, and you will get help to move to any country in the world." "How soon do you want an answer?" asked Lemus. "Now," said Kiva. "You will meet my customer tomorrow and talk to him. Then he will arrange for someone to write down your memories." "Where would I meet your customer?" asked Lemus. "It would be simpler to meet outside the United Kingdom," replied Kiva. "My customer has suggested a meeting in Holland." "I haven't got a passport," said Lemus. "I have a passport for you," said Kiva calmly. "We're flying to The Hague tomorrow morning at 9:45. Shall we go to my flat?" Kiva's flat was in an expensive part of London. He didn't want to talk, and Lemus realized that he was nervous. They were both nervous. Kiva took Lemus to a bedroom, and the next morning he was woken by Kiva at 6 a.m. "I haven't got any luggage," said Lemus. "I've organized your luggage and a British passport," replied Kiva. The passport had his name and details and a photograph. Lemus looked at the date on it. "This passport runs out very soon," he said to Kiva. "My customer doesn't want you to be able to go to other places easily," replied Kiva, laughing. As Kiva answered, Lemus felt nervous again. His life would never be the same after today. "You won't need any money," Kiva said. "The customer is paying for everything." Chapter 6. The House by the Sea. After the plane landed in The Hague, Kiva and Lemus went quickly through the airport. "Have a nice stay in Holland," said the Dutch passport officer. As they walked through the airport to the exit, Lemus looked back. He saw a man with glasses standing reading an English newspaper. He was small, and he looked worried. Lemus and Kiva got into a car in the car park. The driver never spoke as she drove them out of The Hague. Lemus had been there during the war, and he guessed that they were travelling towards the coast. After a short time, the car stopped at a small house by the sea, and a friendly woman opened the door and let them in. Lemus saw a man in a raincoat getting out of another car. "Welcome," the woman said. "Did you have a good journey?" "Yes," replied Kiva. "It was a very good flight." "That's good," she replied, and she disappeared. During Lemus's stay in the house, she brought meals to them, usually bread and cold meat. Then Kiva opened the front door, and the man in the raincoat came in. He was the same height as Lemus, but older. He shook Lemus's hand. "My name is Peters," he said. "Did you have a good flight?" "Yes," replied Kiva quickly. "Mr. Lemus and I have a lot to discuss," said Peters to Kiva. "You can leave now." Kiva smiled. "Goodbye, and good luck," he said to Lemus, and held out his hand. Lemus nodded, but did not shake his hand. Kiever left the house quietly. Peters went into a room at the back of the house, and Lemus followed him. "Listen," said Lemus, suddenly sounding very nervous. "We both know why we're here. I'm a defector, and you're going to pay me for information. You don't all have to pretend that you like me and want to be nice to me." "Kiever told me that you were a proud man," replied Peters, sitting down at a table. He spoke English very well. Lemus guessed that he was Russian, but he was not sure. He sat down too. "Kiever told you what we are going to pay you, didn't he?" asked Peters. "He said that you would pay me £15,000 now," replied Lemus, "and he said that you would pay me another £5,000 if I talked to you during the next year." "Yes, that's right," replied Peters. "I won't accept the £5,000, and I won't talk to you during the next year," said Lemus. "You know that I can't do that. I want to take the £15,000 and get away. If I tell you everything I know, I will have to disappear. The British Secret Service will know what I've done and look for me immediately." Peters nodded, and then he said, "But you could come somewhere safer with us, couldn't you?" "Are you asking me to come behind the Iron Curtain?" asked Lemus. Peters nodded again. "I don't want to do that," Lemus said very quickly. Peters nodded, then said, "Shall we start?" During the morning of the first day, Peters asked questions about what Lemus had done during the war. Lemus told him about being in the army and then getting a number of different jobs because he spoke Dutch, German, and French. Lemus had learned the languages when he lived in Holland because his father had an engineering factory there. The British Secret Service had trained him, and he had worked with spies in Holland and Norway during the war. After the war, he had gone to Berlin. Peters saw that Lemus was sweating. He saw a man who wanted to betray his country, but was upset and uncomfortable. This was what Lemus wanted him to see. Lemus watched Peters, too, and decided that he was good at his job. Peters listened carefully, only asking a few questions. Lemus told Peters about starting to work in Berlin in the 1950s. The British needed to get information from East Germany, but it was hard to find good agents. At last, in 1959, Karl Riemek made contact with him, first by leaving photographs and documents in Lemus's car. Then they had met. Riemek worked for the Presidium of the East German government. He did not have a very important job, but he gave Lemus enormous amounts of useful information about Presidium meetings. He also gave Lemus the names and jobs of people in the East German Secret Service. "Did Riemek give you all the information you're telling me about?" Peters asked. "Yes, of course," replied Lemus. "I see," said Peters. "Please, go on." Peters filled Lemus's glass with more whiskey, as he had done often during the interrogation, and Lemus continued. Bit by bit, he told Peters all about Riemek's work. He gave the names of other agents who Riemek had introduced to Lemus, and the dates they had started being agents. He explained what the circus had thought and how much they had paid Riemek. Peters was pleased at how good Lemus's memory was, even though he was drinking so much. "I don't believe you," said Peters after a while. "Remek's job wasn't important enough. He couldn't do all this on his own." "He did do it," said Lemus, suddenly becoming angry. "Didn't the circus wonder whether there was another person helping him?" asked Peters. "No," replied Lemus. "Oh, that's interesting," said Peters thoughtfully. Then, after a moment, he said, "You heard about Remek's woman, didn't you?" "What about her?" asked Lemus. "She was murdered a week ago. She was shot as she left a flat in West Berlin." Lemus was very surprised. She was in West Berlin. Why wasn't she safe there? He thought. Did Remek tell her the name of another East German agent? And did that agent arrange for someone to kill her so she didn't tell anyone the name? That night, Lemus continued to think about the woman's death. Why didn't Control tell me about it? He wondered. He remembered his question to Control about why they should get rid of Munt, and Control's answer. He had asked, "Why? We've got no one left in Germany to protect. You just said so yourself. Remek was the last one." And Control had replied, "That isn't quite true, but I don't think I need to tell you about it." What did Control know that he didn't tell me? Lemus thought. And why didn't he tell me? That night he thought about the murdered woman, and then he thought about Liz. Chapter 7. Bad News. Peters arrived at the house at 8 a.m. the next morning, and immediately started the interrogation again. He asked Lemus about his time in London since leaving Berlin. Lemus told him the story that he had agreed with Control. He told him about working in the office at the circus that made payments to people working abroad. He explained that he was bored, that he had started to drink, and that he had been asked to leave. Peters was interested in his last job at the circus. "Tell me what you did," he said. "I made payments to agents," replied Lemus. "I got letters telling me to write checks, but I never had the names of the agents or where they were in the world. But sometimes they gave me too much information, so I did know who was going to be paid. I made a list last night of all the payments that I could remember." Lemus gave Peters his list, and Peters read it carefully. "This is good," he said. "Very good." Lemus continued. "I remember an operation called Rolling Stone best," he said. "I made 2 trips abroad because I was working on it. One trip was to Denmark, to Copenhagen, and one was to Finland, to Helsinki. I had to deposit money in banks." "How much money?" $10,000 in Copenhagen and $40,000 in Helsinki," replied Lemus. "Who was the money for?" asked Peters. "I don't know," replied Lemus. "Control didn't tell me." "Was Control managing the operation himself?" asked Peters. "Yes," said Lemus. "I had some information, but not all of it." He gave a lot more information about Rolling Stone to Peters. He explained that the circus gave him false documents for the person who would get the money from the Danish and Finnish banks. He told Peters that some payments were made before he was working in the office. Peters wrote everything down carefully. "What were the names the person had to use to withdraw the money from the banks?" he asked. "Horst Karlsdorf and Adolf Fechtman," said Lemus. "Those are both German names," said Peters. "Yes, but the person wasn't German," replied Lemus quickly. "Why are you sure about that?" asked Peters. "Because I was head of operations in Berlin. I would have known if we were paying large amounts of money to an East German agent," said Lemus, beginning to sound angry. "Are you sure there wasn't another agent for the British working in East Germany?" asked Peters. "I'm sure there wasn't," shouted Lemus, now very angry. He remembered what Control had said. "Give them your information, and let them work out what to think. It will be good to make them think that they know more than you." Peters nodded, as if he understood something about Lemus. He thought that Lemus was angry that the circus might have an agent in East Germany who Lemus did not know about. "You are a very proud man, Mr. Lemus," he said. Peters left the house at lunchtime on the second day. He did not appear that afternoon, and he did not appear the next morning either. Lemus asked the woman who brought his meals where Peters was, but she just smiled and shrugged. At last he decided to go for a walk by the sea. There was a girl on the beach throwing pieces of bread to the seabirds. Lemus thought about Liz. He wanted to do simple things with her, like throw bread to seabirds. He wanted love, and to have a new life with her. He would be home soon, perhaps in 2 weeks. He would have plenty of money, and he could come in from the cold. When he got back to the house, he heard the woman make a phone call. Finally, at 3 p.m., Peters arrived, and as soon as Lemus saw him, he knew that there was a problem. Peters did not take off his coat and did not sit down. "I've got bad news for you," said Peters. "I heard it this morning. The police are searching for you in England. They're checking ships and planes that are leaving the country." "Why do they want me?" thought Lemus. He was shocked and confused, but he stayed silent. "There are articles in all the newspapers, but they just say that police want to talk to you. They don't say that you have defected, but they mention the Official Secrets Act, so people will think that you are a spy." This wasn't part of the plan. I'm supposed to be able to go home in 2 weeks, he thought. Why has Control done this? Lemus felt angry with Control and worried, but he tried to think quickly. What am I going to do? He asked himself. I could refuse to talk any more to Peters, but if I stop acting my part now, the operation against Munt will fail. "Every police force in Western Europe will be looking for you," said Peters. "You've got a choice. You can let us look after you, we can arrange to take you to the East, or you can go away alone. But you will definitely be caught. You don't have any money, your passport runs out in 10 days, and you don't have any false documents." "If I come with you, what will you do with me when you have completed your interrogation?" asked Lemus. Peters shrugged. "We'll give you a new passport, probably. Then you can go where you want." Lemus stared out of the window. At last he said, "All right, I'll come." "There is no plane to the east until tomorrow," said Peters. "But there is a flight to Berlin in an hour. We need to leave now." At the airport, Lemus bought a newspaper. He found an article about himself, and he wondered whether Liz had seen it. Chapter 8. Alec's Friend. Liz was very sad after Alec disappeared. Of course, she heard about him hitting the grocer and going to prison. The members of her Communist Party branch talked about it at a meeting, though they did not know about her and Alec. "He knew he was going to do it," she thought. "He knew it when he said goodbye to me. But why?" Once she went to his flat and talked to his landlord. She did not know why she did it, but the landlord spoke kindly about Alec, so she was pleased she had gone. He told her that a friend of Mr. Lemus, a small, shy man with glasses, had come to see him. The friend said that Mr. Lemus had asked him to pay all his rent. Mr. Lemus was a strange man, the landlord said, but it was very good of him to send his friend to do that. She continued to work at the library, and thought about Alec all the time. Then a man came to see her at her flat. He was a short man who wore glasses and an expensive suit. She thought he must be Alec's friend. The man said that he came from the police, from Special Branch. Then he asked her about Alec. "I believe you were friendly with Alec Lemus," he said worriedly. He looked kind, and Liz trusted him without knowing why. So she answered him honestly. "Yes," she said. "How did you know?" "Oh, we found out by chance," he replied. "When you go to prison, you have to give the names of your family or the people closest to you. Then they can be informed if anything happens to you. And Alec gave your name." "I see." Liz was surprised and confused. "Did anyone know that you were friendly with Alec?" the small man went on. "No." "Did you go to the trial after he hit the grocer?" "No." "Did any people from the newspapers call you?" he asked. "No, I've told you," said Liz. "No one knew, not even my parents." The small man thought for a moment, then asked, "Were you surprised when Alec hit the grocer?" Liz wondered if she was talking too much to him, but she wanted to talk to someone about it. It did not matter now. "Yes, I was surprised," she said, "but I think he knew that he was going to do it." "What do you mean?" the man asked quickly. "Well, the night before he did it, we had supper together," she replied. "It was a special meal, and I asked him, 'Is this goodbye?'" "What did he say?" said the small man. "He said that he had something that he must do. I didn't really understand," Liz said. There was a very long silence, and the small man looked more worried than ever. Liz suddenly felt terrified for Alec, and she did not know why. "Why do you think he asked people to inform you if anything happened to him?" the man asked. Liz felt her face turn red. "I was in love with him," she replied. "Please, don't ask any more questions. Please go now." The small man got up to go, then took out a card from his pocket and put it gently on the table. If you ever want any help, or if anything happens about Alec, ring me," he said. "Do you understand?" "Who are you?" asked Liz. "I'm Alec's friend," he replied. "Oh, just one more question. Did Alec know that you are a member of the Communist Party?" "Yes, I told him," she replied. "Does the party know about you and Alec?" he asked. "No, I told you," she shouted. "No one knew." Then suddenly she cried out, "Where is he? Tell me where he is. I can help him. I can look after him." "He's abroad," replied the small man quietly. "I'm sorry that he told you that he had something special to do." "Who are you?" she asked again. "I'm Alec's friend," he repeated. "Don't worry, we'll look after you, with money and that kind of thing." He went out of the door, and she heard a car start in the street. Then she remembered the card and picked it up off the table. There was only a name, address, and telephone number on it. There was nothing to say what his job was. Mr. George Smiley, 9 Bywater Street, Chelsea. It was very strange. Chapter 9. To the East. Lemus sat on the plane to West Berlin and wondered again why things had changed. Why had his defection been discovered so soon? Control knew, because Control had done this, but Lemus did not know. He also remembered Control's advice when he had stayed at his house for the weekend. Get angry. Drink a lot. Confuse them by telling them that something is true one day, then telling them that the same thing is not true the next day. Make them work hard to get your information. Make them believe they have worked out that Munt has betrayed their side to us. They already have information that we gave them before you became involved. You are taking them the last parts of the story." After the plane landed, Peters led Lemus quickly through the airport to a big black car which was waiting in a car park. After they got into it, a smaller car pulled out of the same car park in front of them. Both cars moved quickly through the streets of Berlin, and Lemus was surprised at how easily they crossed out of the west and into the east. Lemus thought that they would stop in East Berlin, but the car kept moving. "Where are we going?" he asked Peters. "We're here," replied Peters. "We are in the German Democratic Republic." "I thought we would go further east, to Russia," said Lemus. "The East Germans want to talk to you," said Peters. Lemus nodded his head, and Peters continued, "I sent your information to them, and they are interested in it. They've never talked to anyone with your knowledge before." "Who will interrogate me?" asked Lemus. "I know the names of most of the people in the East German Secret Service." "Who do you think that you will meet?" replied Peters. "Fiedler, who works for Munt," said Lemus. Lemus thought back to what he had learned about Fiedler. Lemus remembered that Fiedler had lived in Canada during the war, so he spoke good English. The photographs had shown a thin young man with dark hair and intelligent brown eyes. He was a man who worked alone and whose colleagues did not like or trust him. He remembered what Control had said. Fiedler hates Munt, and he is as clever as Munt. He'd like to get rid of Munt, so he is the person who is most useful to us. You will make him believe that Munt is a double agent working for us, but you mustn't make it obvious. Finally, the car arrived at a farmhouse and stopped outside it. By now it was night, and in the light of the moon Lemus saw two men get out of the small car, which had also stopped. He could also see a thin man sitting in the back of it. Peters took Lemus into the old farmhouse, which smelled like a place where nobody lived. He and Lemus sat down in a room with old, dark-coloured furniture and photos of Soviet leaders on the walls. After a few silent minutes, the door opened, and a short, thin man came in, carrying a bottle of whisky and 2 glasses. He was wearing a dark blue suit that looked too big for him. "Hello," he said to Lemus. "I'm Fiedler. I'm glad to see you. You've reached the end of your journey." "What do you mean?" asked Lemus quickly. "I mean that you're not going any further east. Sorry." Lemus remembered something Control had said. "Make them dislike you, and then they will believe what you tell them more." So he pretended to be very angry. Lemus turned to Peters. "Is this true?" he shouted angrily. "Tell me!" Peters nodded. "Yes, we, the Soviet Secret Service, agreed to help our friends in the East German Secret Service and bring you here." Lemus shouted at Fiedler. "You knew I wouldn't defect to a little unimportant place like the GDR. That's why you sent a Russian." "We had help from the Russians to take you to Holland," said Fiedler. "In fact, we didn't want to bring you to East Germany, but we didn't know that your colleagues in Britain would find out about your defection so quickly. We had to do it because there are still things that you haven't told us." Then Fiedler said something in Russian to Peters, who nodded and stood up. "Goodbye," Peters said to Lemus. Lemus did not answer. Chapter 10. Details. That night, Lemus slept in a small, bare room with only a bed and a desk in it. To get to his room, he had to walk through another room with 2 beds in it. Later, he realized that the 2 men who slept there were guards. In fact, these guards were never far away from him while he was in the farmhouse. The next morning, one of the guards brought some bread and bad coffee for breakfast. Lemus looked out of the window while he was having breakfast. The farmhouse was on the top of a high hill, and, below it, Lemus could see hills covered with tall trees. There were no houses, and a long way below, in a valley, he could see the road. There was no sound. Fiedler came into the room. "Good morning," he said with a smile. "Finish your breakfast, and then we will talk." "I've told Peters everything that I know," replied Lemus. "Oh, no, you haven't," replied Fiedler. "You've only given us one piece of information that we didn't know. I'm talking about Rolling Stone, of course, and I'm sure that you can tell us more." He took Lemus outside, and they went for a walk down the road into the valley, and then along a path through the forest. Fiedler asked lots of questions. He asked about the building in Cambridge Circus in London, and about the people who worked there. He asked about their families and where they lived. Most of all, he wanted to know about why they worked for the circus. "What do they believe in? What is their philosophy?" he asked. "I don't know," said Lemus. "They don't believe in anything. They're just people." "What makes them do these jobs, then?" asked Fiedler. He sounded confused. "I don't know," said Lemus. Then he added, "I suppose they don't like communists." "I see," said Fiedler. "We kill people because we believe in something. It must be harder to kill people if you don't have a philosophy that you believe in." "I don't know," replied Lemus, "and I don't care." He suddenly sounded tired. They stopped while Fiedler gave Lemus a cigarette and lit it for him. About an hour after they had left the farmhouse, they reached the top of a hill. Looking back, Lemus could see the farmhouse across the valley. He was enjoying the walk. "We'll sit down for a moment," said Fiedler, "and then we must go back. Tell me more about Rolling Stone. Large amounts of money were deposited in banks in Copenhagen and Helsinki. What did you think they were for?" "I told Peters," replied Lemus. "They were payments to an agent, probably behind the Iron Curtain." "Why did you think so?" "Well, they were very big payments, and it was very difficult to make them," replied Lemus. "And, of course, control was involved, too." "What do you think that the agent did with the money?" asked Fiedler. "I don't know," said Lemus. "I don't even know if the money was collected. I just went to Denmark and Finland and deposited the money in the banks, and then I came back." "What names did you use, and when did you go to each country?" asked Fiedler. "In Copenhagen I was Robert Lang, and in Helsinki I was Stephen Bennett." "And when did you go to each country?" asked Fiedler. "I went to Denmark on the 15th of June of this year, and to Finland on the 24th of September," replied Lemus. "Did the banks ever write to you?" "I don't know. If they did, the letters went to control, I suppose," replied Lemus. "You didn't know much," said Fiedler. "So it is possible that the Rolling Stone payments were to a double agent in the GDR?" "No," said Lemus. "I told Peters that's impossible. I was in charge, and I knew about all the agents in East Berlin." Fiedler did not reply. Instead, he went on, "You could help us to find out whether anyone withdrew any of the money from those banks. You could write a letter to each of the banks and ask for a current statement. We could send the letters from an address in Switzerland." "How would that help you?" asked Lemus. "If the money was withdrawn, we will know the date when the agent was there. That might be useful," said Fiedler. "You're dreaming, Fiedler," replied Lemus. "You'll never find the person who the payments were for. You don't even know if he's an East German." Fiedler looked out over the valley for a few moments before he spoke again. "We know that Rolling Stone was an operation against us," he said. Lemus realized that Control's plan was working. Fiedler believed in Rolling Stone. "All right," he said. I'll send the letters. Chapter 11. 2 Letters. Lemus was still in bed the next morning when Fiedler brought the letters for him to sign. They each came from a different hotel in Switzerland. Lemus read the first letter. To the manager, Royal Scandinavian Bank, Copenhagen. Dear Sir, I have been travelling for a few weeks and have not received any post from England. For this reason, I have not received your reply to my letter of 3rd of March, asking for a current statement of my joint account with Herr Karlsdorf. I don't want any more delay, so please could you send a statement to me at this address, 13 Avenue des Colombes, Paris 12, France. I am sorry for this confusion. Yours faithfully, Robert Lang. I didn't send them a letter on the 3rd of March, Lemus said. No, you didn't, replied Fiedler. But if the bank thinks that you did, they will be worried and will reply quickly. The second letter was the same as the first one, except for the names. Lemus signed the names on both letters. Fiedler thanked him and told him that someone would post the letters in Switzerland the next day. He expected to hear from his colleagues in Paris about the replies in about a week. So we can go for walks and drive around the hills, said Fiedler, and you can tell me more details about the circus. There were many more walks that week. Both men were relaxed, and Lemus talked a lot about his job and the circus. In the evenings they ate together and talked in front of a fire. The two men began to like each other, and almost to trust each other, although Fiedler did not understand why Lemus had wanted to defect. Fiedler told Lemus that he had only been to England once when he was a child. But, Fiedler said, Munt worked there. Did you know that he worked in London? Oh, yes, replied Lemus. He killed 2 people while he was there, and he nearly killed my colleague George Smiley, too. It was amazing that Munt managed to escape, wasn't it? Said Fiedler. I heard that they didn't really want to catch him, replied Lemus. What? Said Fiedler. Someone told me that one of our people made some big mistakes, replied Lemus. It was better to let Munt escape than to let too many people find out about them. Did anyone suggest that there was another reason why the circus let Munt escape? What do you mean? Asked Lemus. Fiedler did not reply then, but, as the days passed, he started to seem tense and worried. One day, when they were driving in the hills, Fiedler made a long phone call from a phone box. Lemus wondered why he did not use a phone in the farmhouse. Later, Fiedler said, "We must be careful, both of us." "Why? What do you know?" asked Lemus quickly. "You might have to look after yourself for a while," Fiedler said. "But don't worry. Everything will be all right." He held Lemus's arm tightly and continued speaking. "Munt has never done an interrogation before. I've always done them. Munt likes to kill people, not talk to them, and I've often wondered why." His hand held Lemus's arm more tightly. "I've thought about it, Lemus. I think he killed British agents who might know too much about him. I think Munt is a double agent, working for the circus." "You're crazy," said Lemus angrily. "It's not true. I was in charge in Berlin. The circus couldn't have an agent who I didn't know about, not an agent who was the head of operations for the East German Secret Service." "That phone call," said Fiedler, "was about the reply to your letter to the bank in Copenhagen. Someone withdrew all the money from the account a week after you deposited it. It happened when Munt was on a visit to Copenhagen." In London, Liz had received a letter too. It came from the organisers of the Communist Party in Britain. "Dear Comrade, we have had an invitation from the party in the German Democratic Republic for some of our members to visit party branches there. There are going to be visits from members of the Bayswater branch to the Neuenhagen branch in Leipzig. We asked for names of people who might be interested, and your name was given to us. We are sure that you are the right comrade for this job. All costs will be paid by the party in the GDR. We are sure that you will want to accept this invitation. The visit will happen at the end of this month. Members will travel alone because the visits will happen at different times. Please let us know as soon as possible whether you can accept, and we will let you have more information." Liz wondered who had given her name to the organisers. Then she remembered a man who she had met at a big meeting for all the London branches. He had asked lots of questions. Ash, that was his name, she thought. Perhaps it was him. She felt excited because it was a trip abroad. After writing to accept the invitation, she saw Smiley's card. She remembered him saying, "Did the party know about you and Alec?" And she smiled. The trip abroad would help her to forget about Alec. Chapter 12. Arrest. After their conversation in the car, Fiedler and Lemus drove back to the farmhouse in the dark. Fiedler parked the car at the side of the house, and as they walked towards it, they saw 3 men standing near the front door. "Fiedler, we want to talk to you. We are from Berlin," shouted one of them. "What's going on?" said Fiedler. "Why aren't the lights on in the house?" Fiedler walked towards the men. Lemus could not see the guards who usually stayed near him when he was at the house. He waited for a moment, then went inside. He could not switch the lights on because they were controlled from a central point by an unseen hand. Slowly and carefully, he walked in the darkness towards his bedroom. He walked into the guard's bedroom and realized that they were not there either. And then, suddenly, the door behind him closed. The room was completely dark. He smelled cigarette smoke from his own bedroom. Then he heard the key turn in the lock of the door behind him, and he knew that he could not escape. Lemus remembered his training. He walked towards a chair that he knew was in a corner of the room, and kicked it into the centre of the room. The people in the room knew that he was there, so he did not need to be quiet. Counting his footsteps, he moved back from the chair and stood in one corner. He knew where the chair was, but they did not. "Why don't you come in, then?" he said in German. "I'm here, in the corner. Come and get me." There was no sound from the other room. "Come on, then," shouted Lemus. "Are you scared?" At last he heard one person moving forwards out of his bedroom, then another one. He heard the first one walk into the chair and cry out in pain. This was what he was waiting for. He moved forward, holding his left arm out in front of him until he touched an arm. He hit it gently twice, and a voice very close to him whispered, "Hans, is that you?" "Be quiet," whispered Lemus. At the same time he reached out, got hold of the man's hair, and pulled his head forward. He hit him hard on the back of his neck, then pulled him up again and hit the front of his neck. The man fell heavily to the floor and did not move. Then, suddenly, the lights came on, and the door behind Lemus opened, making Lemus turn round quickly. Something hit him on the back of his head, and he fell to the floor. When Lemus woke, he was cold, and he could feel blood on his face. He was lying on a stone floor, and when he tried to move, terrible pain went through his body. His hands and feet were held together behind his back by a chain. Above him there was a bright light, and he was in a white, empty room. He lay on the floor in pain for hours. At last the door opened, and Munt came in, followed by 2 guards. Lemus looked at Munt, and remembered George Smiley telling him about Munt's frightening eyes. The 2 guards untied his arms and legs. He tried to stand, but they kicked him, so he fell down again. Then they pulled him along a corridor to a small room with a desk and 2 armchairs. Munt sat at the desk, and the guards put Lemus in an armchair, where he sat with his eyes closed. "Give me a drink," whispered Lemus. Munt gave him a glass of water from a bottle on his desk. "Bring him something to eat," he said to the guards. They quickly brought a cup of soup and some pieces of sausage. Lemus ate and drank while they watched in silence. "Where's Fiedler?" asked Lemus finally. "He's been arrested," replied Munt. "What for?" asked Lemus. "He's working for the enemies of the GDR," Munt said. "I see," said Lemus. "You think Fiedler is working for the British Secret Service, and that I'm here to help him. You think I'm here to make the East German Secret Service believe you are an agent for the British, so you've arrested us both." "That's right. You'll both be put on trial," replied Munt. "You will also be put on trial for murder." "So the guard died, did he?" Lemus replied. Munt nodded, and then he went on. "You aren't really a defector, of course. As soon as I read Peters's report, I knew why you were here. I knew that Fiedler would believe that I was a double agent, because he hates me and wants my job." "So you've won," said Lemus. "Yes," replied Munt. "Fiedler sent a report to the Presidium yesterday that he didn't send to me. But I saw it, and I knew that he wanted to arrest me." The pain all over Lemus's body was increasing. Suddenly there was shouting, and the door opened violently. Lemus could not open his eyes because of his pain, but he could feel that the room was full of people. He did not know what was happening. Suddenly there was silence, and then someone picked him up gently and carried him out of the room. When he woke again, he was in a hospital bed, and standing beside it was Fiedler. Chapter 13. Branch Meeting. Lemus looked around the quiet hospital room, and then at Fiedler, who was calmly smoking a cigarette. "How do you feel?" asked Fiedler. "Awful," replied Lemus. "They beat me up, you know." "Yes," said Fiedler. "And you killed the guard." "I guessed that I had," said Lemus. "But I had to protect myself. What happened to you?" "Oh, Mundt's men beat me up too," replied Fiedler. "And he interrogated me as well, but I knew that he would lose." "Why?" asked Lemus. "I had collected evidence against him," he replied. "Then you brought me the last piece of evidence that I needed, about the payments. I put it all in my report to the Presidium. So, while he and his men were beating us up, the members of the Presidium were setting up a tribunal." "What's that?" asked Lemus. "It's a secret trial," said Fiedler. "It will happen tomorrow. Mundt has been arrested, and you will give evidence against him." Then a nurse brought Lemus some food, which he ate, although he still felt awful. Fiedler watched him without speaking. "What will happen in the tribunal?" asked Lemus. "There are 3 judges. One of them, the president, is in charge of the others," Fiedler said. "I will put the case against Mundt, and a clever man called Carden will defend him." "Why can't Mundt defend himself?" Lemus asked. "Mundt has asked for Carden to do it. I have been told that Carden will call a witness." They sat in silence again, and then Fiedler spoke. "You must get some sleep," he said. "Tomorrow you can talk." Lemus went to sleep feeling pleased. He was pleased that Fiedler was on his side against Mundt, even though Fiedler was really on the other side, against the British Secret Service. And tomorrow Mundt would receive a sentence of death. At the same time, Liz was in Leipzig, where she had been for a few days. She was staying with a kind woman called Comrade Ebert, who was the secretary of the Communist Party's Neuenhagen branch. Liz knew some German, so she could talk a little to people. She helped with work, giving books to people about the party and visiting members who had not been to meetings recently. The branch meeting was on the 4th evening of her visit. There was going to be a discussion about working and living together after 2 wars, and Comrade Ebert told Liz that a lot of people would come. It was hard to make people come to the branch meetings in London, so Liz wanted to get ideas to take home. She was pleased that the meeting room was better than the one in London. But then only 7 people came, and Liz was very upset. Liz was waiting for Comrade Ebert to put on her coat after the end of the meeting, when a man opened the door. "Comrade Ebert?" he asked. "Yes," Comrade Ebert replied. "I'm looking for an English comrade," he continued. "She is staying with you, Comrade Gold?" "I'm Elizabeth Gold," said Liz. "My name is Holton. I'm from the party," he said. He showed some papers to Comrade Ebert, who looked at them and nodded. Then she looked at Liz a bit nervously. "I have a message for Comrade Gold," Holton said. "You are invited to a special meeting of the Presidium." "Oh," said Liz, wondering how the Presidium knew about her. "We must leave tonight," he said. "We have a long way to go, to Görlitz." "Where's that?" asked Liz. "It's to the east, near Poland," replied Comrade Abert. Liz felt confused. She was pleased that the party thought she was important enough to invite to a special meeting, but she was also surprised. She wondered why they were going to travel so far to the east, but she did not feel she could ask any questions. Holton said, "We can collect your things, and then we can continue the journey immediately." Liz realized that she had to do what he said. She followed Holton to a black car with a flag on the front. As soon as she and Holton got in, the driver started the engine and drove away. Chapter 14. The Tribunal. The courtroom was painted white and was about the same size as a school classroom. At one end, guards and members of the Presidium sat on wooden benches. At the other end, Lemus could see the 3 judges, 2 men and a woman, sitting at a big table. In front of the table, there were 2 men sitting on wooden chairs opposite each other. There was a man in a dark suit who was about 60 years old. This must be Carden, thought Lemus. The other man was Fiedler. Lemus sat at the back of the room with a guard on each side of him. He could see Munt sitting on a bench a few rows in front of him, with policemen all round him. Suddenly, the middle one of the 3 tribunal members stood up. She was a small woman in her 50s, with short dark hair. She nodded at a guard to close the door and began to speak. "I am the president of this tribunal. You all know why we are here. This is a tribunal that the Presidium has asked for, and you must remember that what happens here is secret." Then she pointed at Fiedler. "Comrade Fiedler, you can begin." Fiedler stood up, took some papers from a small bag, and began to speak. Lemus thought he talked well. He sounded both serious and confident. "The case against Comrade Munt is that he is an agent working for the British Secret Service who has given them information," said Fiedler. "Also, he has received large payments from the British Secret Service for that information. There is no worse crime than this one, and his sentence has to be a death sentence. Comrade Munt is 42 years old and is head of operations for the Secret Service of the GDR. He was recruited when he was 28, and for many years did special work in Scandinavia, in Norway, Sweden, and Finland, so he was able to travel easily to this part of the world. He was good at his job, recruiting agents who worked for us in the West. But he became greedy for money, and this is why he has betrayed his country and his people. We have caught him because of his greed for large amounts of money." Fiedler now looked down at his papers. "At the end of 1956, Munt was sent to London to work," he said. "But At the end of his time there, in the early 1960s, there were problems, and 2 people died. The British wanted to arrest Munt. Then he disappeared for 2 days. Surprisingly, after those 2 days, he took a taxi to a London airport and flew to Berlin. The British police were searching for him, but he was able to leave the country easily because the British Secret Service had recruited him. I believe that they had told him that they would send him to prison for many years, or he could work as an agent for them. If he worked for them, he could return to his country and receive large payments for the information that he gave them. Fiedler paused and looked round the room, then continued. We received information some time ago about the large amount of special knowledge that the British Secret Service had about the GDR. I cannot tell you where that information came from, but it made us believe that someone in our Secret Service was giving it to them. It had to be someone with an important job, but we were not sure who it was. I wondered if it was Munt, but it seemed amazing that our own head of operations could do this. But then the final evidence was brought to us. He turned to the back of the room. "Bring Lemus forward," he said. The guards on either side of Lemus stood up and led him forward. They made him stand in front of the table between Fiedler and Carden. The President spoke to him. "What is your name?" she asked. "Alec Lemus." "What is your age?" she continued. 50. "What is your job?" "I work in a library," replied Lemus. This reply made Fiedler angry. "You worked for the British Secret Service, didn't you?" he said. "Yes, that's right," said Lemus. "You can see from my report," Fiedler went on, speaking to everyone in the room, "that Lemus is a defector from the British Secret Service. But you will hear suggestions that he is not a defector at all. Herr Carden will defend Munt by saying that Lemus was sent by the British Secret Service to make us think that Munt is a traitor. But this is not true. We found Lemus, persuaded him to defect, and brought him to the GDR. Lemus was in charge of the East German agents for the British in Berlin, and he does not believe that Munt is a double agent. But he has given us evidence that helps us to prove that Munt is a traitor." Lemus remembered Control's words again. "Give them your information, and let them work out what to think." He had done this to Fiedler. Then Fiedler spoke to Lemus. "The tribunal has read all the reports of your interrogation," he said, "but I want you to tell them yourself about the operation called Rolling Stone." He turned to the judges. "You have copies of the letters that I will mention," he said. Fiedler asked Lemus the same questions that he had asked him before, and Lemus talked about the bank accounts in Helsinki and in Copenhagen that he had put money in. Fiedler then explained about the letters that had been sent recently from Lemus to these banks. "We haven't had a reply from Helsinki," he said. but we have had a reply from Copenhagen. Limes deposited $10,000 on the 15th of June this year, and this money was taken out of the account 1 week later. Comrade Munt was in the city for a few days at that time. Limes visited Helsinki on the 24th of September and deposited $40,000. Comrade Munt was in the city for a few days at that time. There was silence. Then Fiedler continued, "We can also prove that Comrade Munt arranged the murders of a number of East German double agents so that they did not discover that he was also a British agent. Karl Riemek was different. He was an agent who worked for Munt and knew that Munt worked for the British. So Riemek was a danger to Munt. When I started to suspect that Munt was a double agent. Munt told Riemek to escape because he was in danger, then gave an order to the guards at the checkpoint to shoot him. Later, he killed Riemek's woman because Riemek used to talk to her too much about his secret work." No one spoke. Everyone was looking from Fiedler to Munt. "This is a greedy, violent man who has betrayed his country and its people," said Fiedler. "For Hans-Dieter Munt, the only sentence is a death sentence." Chapter 15. Confession. The president of the tribunal turned to the man in the black suit sitting opposite Fiedler. "Comrade Carden," she said, "do you want to talk to the witness, Limes?" Yes, I would like to do that," Carden said, standing up slowly. He put on his glasses, and then he started to speak. "Comrade Munt believes that Limes is lying. We know that Karl Riemek was a traitor, a British spy, but Munt was not. He did not accept money for betraying our party. We say that there is no real evidence that he did, but there is evidence that Limes is part of a British plan. Limes has involved Comrade Fiedler in this plan to make us think that Comrade Munt is a traitor." The man spoke gently and politely. "We say that Limes pretended to go downhill and to drink too much, so that he had to leave his job with the circus. He pretended to hate his employers, and he hit a shopkeeper so that he was arrested and went to prison. All these things happened to make us think that he was a man who would like to defect and betray his country. He planned to say that Munt was not a traitor, but he gave us evidence that suggested that he was. It was a clever plan." Carden went on in the same polite voice. "We say that the information that Limes gave to Fiedler about payments into bank accounts for Munt is false. The British knew that Fiedler hated Munt and wanted his job, so they knew that he would help their plan by believing Limes. But for months, Munt has known that Fiedler wants to get rid of him, and he has been very careful. It was Munt who planned our first approach to Limes in England. And when Limes was first interrogated, Munt saw the reports. He saw what Lemus had said about the dates of his visits to banks in Denmark and Finland. Then he was certain that there was a British operation to get rid of him. Comrade Munt then began to check on Lemus's life before his defection. He was looking for a mistake in the plan, and he found one, a very simple one, and he found a witness. But before we talk to the witness, let me ask Mr. Lemus a few questions. "Tell me," said Carden, "do you have much money?" "Of course not," replied Lemus angrily. "I wouldn't be here if I had plenty of money." "Is there someone in England who would lend you money or pay your bills for you?" "No," said Lemus. "Thank you," said Carden. "Here's another question. Do you know George Smiley?" "Yes, of course," replied Lemus. "He was in the circus. He left it before I did." "Have you seen him since you left the circus?" asked Carden. Lemus paused before he answered, because he was not sure why Carden was asking these questions. At last he said, "No." "And was Smiley interested in you after you left the circus?" Carden asked. "No, of course not," replied Lemus. "And tell me, when you hit the grocer, how much money did you have?" "Nothing," said Lemus. "I'd been ill for a week and hadn't eaten anything. That's when I decided to defect, and—" Carden interrupted him. "You were owed money by the library, of course, weren't you?" "How did you know that?" asked Lemus, suddenly worried. Carden did not answer. "Thank you. You can sit down," he said. Then the guards took Lemus back to his seat on the bench. The door opened, and a large, ugly woman in a grey uniform came in. Behind her was Liz. She came slowly into the courtroom, looking around her. Lemus had forgotten how young she was. When she saw him between the two guards, she stopped. "Alec," she said. One of the guards put his hand on her arm and led her to where Lemus had stood in front of the big table. "What is your name, child?" asked the President. "Elizabeth Gold. You are a member of the British Communist Party?" "Yes," replied Liz. Suddenly there was the noise of furniture falling over on the floor, and the sound of Lemus's voice, ugly and loud, shouting, "Leave her alone! Leave her alone!" Liz turned round, and was terrified when she saw a guard hit Lemus hard on his jaw. Two other men got hold of his arms and pulled them behind his back. Liz saw that his face was white, and there was blood on his jaw. Then his head fell forward. "If he moves again, take him out of the room," said the President. Then she spoke to Liz again. "You know the rule that you must not ask another comrade for details of what the party does, don't you?" Liz nodded. "Yes, of course," she said quietly. "Today you must remember that rule. It is better that you don't know any details. We are members of the party who work for the Presidium. We are going to ask you some questions which you must answer. It is important that you speak the truth when you answer them." said the President.
"But who is on trial?" Liz whispered. "Is it Alec?" "I have told you that it is better you don't know anything. Then you can go home," replied the President. "This man is going to ask you some questions."
The President pointed to Carden, who stood up and spoke politely to Liz.
"Alec Lemus was your lover, wasn't he?" Carden said.
Liz nodded.
"When did you see him last, before today?" "At his flat," she replied. "He was ill. I went to help him." "I suppose that cost you a lot of money," said Carden. His voice sounded kind, but Liz did not trust him. "I got the money from Alec," she replied.
"Oh," said Carden quickly, "so he did have money."
"Oh, God, have I said something wrong?"
thought Liz. She was becoming frightened. She wanted to see Lemus's face so she could guess what he wanted her to say, but he was behind her.
"He didn't have much money," she said. "He couldn't pay his bills. They were all paid after he'd gone. A friend paid them."
"Of course," said Carden in his kind voice. "Did you ever meet this friend, Elizabeth?" She shook her head. "I see," said Carden. There was a terrible silence in the courtroom. It was terrifying for Liz, because she felt like a blind person in a room full of people who could see. They understood the meaning of her answers, but she did not. "Do you earn much money, Elizabeth?" asked Carden.
"No," she whispered.
"It must be hard to pay the rent on your flat every month," he said. "Have you paid this month's rent?" She shook her head again. "Why not?" asked Carden. "Don't you have any money?" In a whisper she replied,
"Someone bought the lease and gave me the flat. They sent it in the post."
"Who?"
"I don't know."
Liz was crying now.
"Please, don't ask any more questions."
But Carden did ask more questions as Liz sobbed and sobbed. No one in the courtroom moved. "Tell me," he asked, "did anyone come to see you after Lemus went away?"
"No,"
she said. She knew that they were trying to hurt Alec, and she did not want to give them any more information. "But your neighbors have told us that a man came to see you, Elizabeth," he continued. "Who was he?"
"I don't know."
"Who was he?" Carden asked again. At last Liz replied.
"His name was Smiley. He left his card with his name and address. He said to get in touch with him if I needed any help."
There was complete silence in the court, and then Carden spoke again, pointing towards Lemus. "Lemus had done the one thing the British Secret Service never expected him to do. He had found a lover, like Remek did, in fact. Smiley wanted to know how much Lemus had told the girl." Then he turned again to Liz and started to ask questions again. "Did you try to get in touch with Lemus?"
"No, he told me not to. He made me promise not to follow him and never to try to find him." And the last time you saw him, did you say goodbye?"
Looking very tired, Liz nodded.
"What reason did he give for leaving you?" asked Carden.
His voice now sounded ugly.
"He didn't leave me," she said. "He just said there was something he had to do, and afterwards he would come back, if he could. He said that things weren't as bad as they seemed, and that I would be looked after." "So that is why you didn't ask about who gave you the lease?" "Yes."
Liz was sobbing again now.
"You knew that already. So why did you bring me here?"
Carden waited for her to stop sobbing, then turned to the silent members of the tribunal.
"It is fortunate that Lemus met this girl, because now we can be certain that there was an operation against Comrade Munt. We know that Smiley and the circus helped the girl."
As Carden quietly sat down, Lemus stood up. The guards did not stop him this time. As he walked to the front of the room, he was trying to work out why the circus had behaved in this way. "We, Control, Smiley and I, made a careful story to prove that I was a defector," he thought. "But Smiley paid my bills, and even bought the lease of Liz's flat and gave it to her. Why would they try to make the operation go wrong? And how do the East Germans know so much about me?" Lemus couldn't understand it, but he knew that he had to help Liz and Fiedler. He had to make a confession about the operation against Munt. His face was white as he stood in front of Carden. "Let her go," he said. Liz was staring at him with tears in her eyes.
"No, Alec," she said. "Don't tell them anything because of me."
"It's too late now," said Lemus. Then he turned to the president. "She knows nothing. Send her home. I'll tell you everything." The president talked quietly to the men on either side of her, then said,
"She can leave the court, but she can't go home until the tribunal has finished."
"She knows nothing," shouted Lemus. "Carden is right. It was an operation to get rid of Munt. Let her go."
"She is a witness," replied the woman. "Fiedler may want to question her." "She knows nothing," said Fiedler. He was sitting with his hands on his knees, looking down at them. "Lemus is right. Let her go." He stood up and led Liz to the door, with his arm around her shoulders.
Liz looked back at Lemus, but he could not look at her.
"Go back to England," said Fiedler gently,
and Liz began to sob as the woman in the grey uniform took her out. Lemus began to speak to everyone in the room. "Carden is right. After all our East German spies were killed, we, Control, Smiley and I, decided to get rid of Munt. You know what we did so that you would think I was a defector. Smiley always said the operation could go wrong, but I don't know why he paid my bills and bought the girl's lease." He turned to the president. "Fiedler hates Munt, but Munt isn't an agent for the British. Fiedler just believed in my story. He's a good, honest man, working for his country." Fiedler smiled and said, It's strange. The circus would expect Munt to check up on Lemus's story, wouldn't they? That's why they made it so good. So I wonder why Smiley paid the bills and bought the lease. I don't know. And I don't know how Munt found the girl, said Lemus. I've been very stupid. But Munt hasn't been stupid, said Fiedler, smiling again. How did he know about the lease? Perhaps he can tell us. She increased the amount she paid to the party every month, Munt said. She doesn't earn much money, so I checked why she could suddenly afford to pay more. Then I found out about the lease. That's a good answer, replied Fiedler calmly. Then the president said, Comrade Fiedler will not do any more work until the Presidium has thought about our report. Lemus has already been arrested, and Comrade Munt will decide what to do with him. She looked at Munt, but he was looking at Fiedler. And as Lemus looked at them both, he suddenly understood the circus's plan. It was horribly clear. Chapter 16. In from the Cold. Liz had been in a small dark room for many hours when she heard footsteps in the corridor outside. She had no idea whether it was day or night. The door opened, and a man stood there without coming into the room. A small amount of blue light from the corridor came into the room, so that she recognized him immediately. "It's Munt," he said. "Come with me, immediately." Liz was terrified and stood in the middle of the room, not knowing what to do. "Come on, hurry," he said. He stepped into the room, took hold of her arm, and led her out into the corridor. She watched, confused, as he locked the door of the room. Then he made her run down a number of badly lit corridors. She noticed that he always checked that no one was coming as they turned into another corridor. Suddenly he stopped, put a key in a door, and pushed her outside. She could feel the cold air of the winter evening on her face. He led her forward again, along a path towards a road. Parked by the side of the road was a car. Standing beside it was Alec Lemus. "Wait here," said Munt, as he started to move towards Lemus. She waited for a long while as the two men talked quietly to each other. Her body shook because of the cold and her fear. Finally, Munt returned. "Come with me," he said, and he led her to where Lemus stood. The two men looked at each other for a moment. "Goodbye," said Munt. "You're a stupid man, Lemus." And he turned and walked quickly away. She put out her hand and touched Lemus, but he pushed it away and opened the car door. "Alec," she whispered, "why is he letting us go?" "He's letting us go because we've done our job," said Lemus. "Don't think about it. Get in the car." She got in and asked again, "Why? They said you worked with Fiedler against him." Lemus did not answer. He started the car and was soon driving along a narrow road. He looked at his watch. "We're 5 hours away from Berlin," he said. "We need to be there by 1:45. There's enough time." For a while, Liz said nothing. Then she said,
"You and Munt are enemies, aren't you?"
Lemus still did not reply. He was driving very fast now, with his tense hands holding the wheel tightly.
"What will happen to Fiedler?"
asked Liz suddenly, and this time Lemus answered. "Munt will arrange for him to be shot," he said.
"So why aren't they going to shoot you?" she asked quickly. "Why has Munt let you go?"
"All right," shouted Lemus. "I'll tell you what you and I weren't supposed to know. Munt is a double agent. He is a spy for the British Secret Service. Fiedler worked out that he was a spy, and this is the end of an operation by Control to save Munt. The circus has used us to kill Fiedler and keep Munt working for the British. No one will suspect that Munt is a double agent now." After a moment, Lemus continued. "Control lied to me. He said that we had to kill Munt because he was dangerous to the British Secret Service. He told me that we had to make the East Germans believe Munt was a double agent. Then they would kill him. I helped to make the plan. It was going to be my last job. I went downhill, lost my job, got the job in the library, hit the grocer, went to prison, you know all that."
"And you became my lover,"
said Liz. "That wasn't part of the plan," said Lemus. "My job was to give evidence to Fiedler that Munt was a spy for the British so that the East Germans would arrest Munt. I didn't know that Munt knew everything, including information about you. He sent people to recruit me as a defector and take me to Holland, then Germany. He sent Fiedler to interrogate me. Fiedler believed me and sent his evidence to the Presidium. But Munt could prove I wasn't a real defector because he had the information about Smiley and the circus looking after you, which they gave to him. Control didn't tell me about that part of the plan."
"But how could the circus know about me?" Liz cried. "They couldn't make us fall in love."
"It didn't matter," replied Lemus. "A man called Pitt at the Labour Exchange was working for the circus. He sent me to the library so I would meet you. The circus could make it look like we were lovers even if we weren't. And you were a member of the Communist Party, so it was easy to invite you to East Germany. But we made it very easy for them."
"Yes, we did," she said. "We helped them by becoming lovers, and it makes me feel awful. And I still don't understand why he is letting me go. When I get back, I could tell people about this."
"Our escape will help Munt," replied Lemus. "It will show the Presidium that there are still double agents in the organization, because someone helped us. So they will need Munt's help to find them."
"So more people can be killed, like Fiedler?" asked Liz.
"Fiedler lost and Munt won," replied Lemus, shrugging. "That's what happens."
"But Fiedler is a good, honest man," cried Liz. "You said that yourself."
"And Munt is a horrible, violent man," said Lemus. "But Fiedler is an enemy on the other side, and Munt is a friend on the British side. This is what the Secret Services are like, Liz. They do bad things so ordinary people like you can sleep safely in their beds."
"It's horrible, Alec," shouted Liz. "You're as bad as them."
"It's the Cold War, and I hate it, Liz," he replied, sounding very tired. "You've never seen men die like I have." They were driving along city streets. Lemus was suddenly tense, and he slowed the car. Liz saw a small light moving in front of them. "That's him," Lemus said to himself quietly. He stopped and opened one of the back doors, and a man got in. Liz did not turn round. She just stared at the rain that was now falling.
"Drive at 30 kilometers an hour. I'll tell you the way," said the man.
Liz thought he sounded tense and frightened, and very young.
"When we reach the right place, you must get out and run straight to the wall," he said to Lemus. "The searchlight will shine where you must climb. When the searchlight moves away, begin to climb. The girl must follow you. You'll have to sit on the top and pull the girl up. Do you understand?"
"We understand," replied Lemus. "How long is it before we get there?"
"We will be there in about 9 minutes," said the man. "They have only given you a short time. The searchlight will move away at 1:05. Then you have 90 seconds to escape. And don't turn back. If you fall or get hurt, keep going. They will shoot anyone they see on this side of the wall. You must get over it."
"We know," said Lemus. Lemus drove the car carefully through the dark, wet streets, turning right and left when the young man told him to do so.
"We are nearly there,"
said the young man.
"Go slowly," he continued. "Now turn left. Turn left!"
They were in a very dark, narrow street. The young man told Lemus to stop the car and turn off the lights.
"Look,"
he said, pointing down a small street to their left. They could see a small part of the wall, huge and grey-brown in the yellow lights, with barbed wire on top of it.
"There is a small cut in the wire in the place where you must climb," he said to them.
All three of them got out of the car.
"Goodbye,"
said the young man. Liz looked at his face and knew that he was very frightened.
"Goodbye,"
she said. As they were walking along the street, they heard the car drive away. They stopped in the darkness on a small piece of ground not far from the wall. 2 minutes to go, said Lemus, looking at his watch. Liz said nothing. As they watched the searchlight move along the wall and stop in front of them, Lemus looked at his watch again. "Are you ready?" he asked. Liz nodded. Lemus took hold of her arm, and they began to walk across the small piece of ground. Liz wanted to run, but he held her arm tightly because he could not really believe that Munt was letting her go. He did not understand it. They were almost there when the searchlight moved away and they were in darkness. Lemus continued walking until he could feel the rough concrete blocks of the wall with his hand. Looking up, he could just see that there was a small gap in the wire on the top. There were pieces of metal in the wall that he could use as steps. Putting his foot on the first one, he started to climb. When he was on the last one, he reached up to pull himself onto the top. "Come on," he whispered. "Start climbing." He lay down and took hold of her hand as she came to the last metal step. Slowly, he started to pull her up. Suddenly, enormous lights came on all round them. Lemus was shocked, and it seemed as if he was blind. He still held Liz's hand, but her feet had come off the metal steps, so she was hanging in the air. He called her name and started again to pull her up. Then there was the sound of sirens and shouting. Lemus knelt on the rough concrete and got hold of both of her arms, pulling her to him. Then they shot her. Lemus felt the shots as they hit her, 3 or 4 of them, and her thin arms fell from his hands. He heard a voice shout in English from the other side of the wall.
"Jump, Alec! Jump, man!"
Now there was more shouting. There were English voices and German voices. Lemus heard Smiley's voice quite close to him.
"The girl. Where's the girl?"
Lemus put his hand above his eyes to keep the bright lights away and looked down. He saw Liz lying on the ground. For a moment he did nothing, and then he began to climb back down the same metal steps. He stood beside her. She was dead. Nothing happened for a moment, and then they shot him. As he fell next to Liz, Lemus knew that he had finally come in from the cold.